Senate confirmation hearings are set to begin Tuesday for President Trump's Supreme Court nominee, Judge Brett Kavanaugh. Lawmakers are expected to press Kavanaugh on a wide range of issues, including Roe v. Wade and special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation. Some Democrats say the hearings should have been delayed over the White House's refusal to release nearly 100,000 pages of documents from Kavanaugh's work with the Bush administration, a topic that came up on the Sunday talk shows.
This denial of access to documents violates a rule that we thought was the tradition of the Senate.
Democrats have more than enough information to understand that this is a highly qualified jurist that should be the next Supreme Court justice.
CBSN political contributor and Associated Press White House reporter Zeke Miller is in Washington. Zeke, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So how does this issue of the unreleased documents, how do you think it's going to play out in the confirmation hearings?
It's going to be fairly predictable. Both sides have sort of staked out their position on this. We know that Brett Kavanaugh worked in the Bush administration. He served as the staff secretary by a position that meant he touched every piece of paper pretty much that happened, that moved around that White House when he was there a decade and a half ago. So the challenge for Democrats is they've asked to see pretty much everything. Republicans have said that's an unreasonable request. They came back with something with a smaller volume of information they requested, and some of that was already too much for them to produce because he was involved in so much paperwork. So Republicans are going to say, he shouldn't be penalized for having been in government service. Had he been a private attorney in private practice at that time, nobody would be going after the paperwork of his clients or the things he was doing at that time. Democrats are making the case that they want utmost transparency here. So both sides have staked out where they're going to be. It's probably not going to move a single vote because barring, Kavanaugh sort of, failing to meet expectations, the expectations is he's going to be fairly, prepared for his hearings like most nominees are. Republicans are fairly on board with his confirmation, and they have the votes to do it.
Republicans have a slim majority in the Senate after the death of John McCain, whose replacement hasn't been announced yet. Is the White House expecting Kavanaugh to sail through the hearings, or are they holding their breath that something could still come up in the next few days that would derail their chances?
The White House, they've made it pretty clear that they think Kavanaugh is well prepared. They've done the mock hearings in the Eisenhower Executive Office building over the last few weeks, where they've brought in everything. They've simulated everything from having stand-ins for individual senators to have protesters, because there are expected to be some protesters when Kavanaugh does face the committee this week, just so he's prepared for every eventuality. So from the White House perspective, they think that this should be a layup for them. It should be a layup for Kavanaugh, assuming there are no surprises come to the hearing, and they think there should be no surprises after that, after all their preparations.
Layup, but perhaps not a slam dunk. Now, moving to the Mueller investigation, Monday, Labor Day, was the deadline President Trump's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, had set for special counsel Robert Mueller to wrap up his investigation. Have there been any grumblings within the White House that it appears this investigation is going to be going into the fall, you think?
From the White House, there's been a sort of a sense of resignation when it comes to that. They know they can't control Robert Mueller. They know there's pretty much nothing they can do to speed up his timetable. He's going to take whatever time he needs. And that's obviously short of the president acting to remove him, which he's made fairly clear that he's not going to do, particularly ahead of those midterm elections. The separate issue is that freeze, the typical freeze before an election. The challenge there is it's not really clear if Mueller would be bound by that because he's investigating the president, who isn't on the ballot this fall. I mean, he's metaphorically on the ballot in the sense that this is a nationalized race where Republicans are having to defend their association with the president. Democrats are feeding off of this of the president's lower than usual approval numbers to drive people out. But in terms of the Department of Justice guidelines that lead to that sort of traditional freeze before an election, it's not totally clear that would be applicable in this case. That said, Robert Mueller is obviously very aware of the dynamics of how politically charged this environment is, and that if he were to take any action now, there would certainly be a political connotation to that. So it really is a kind of a wait-and-see game on both sides. What will Mueller do between now and Election Day, if anything at all? And there's not much anything that anyone in the White House or the Department of Justice or anywhere else can really do about it.
Now, word is that Giuliani is working on a counter report. What do we know about that?
We know this is going to be his sort of presentation of the facts, and as he sees them, and also a direct attempt to undermine Robert Mueller and the people who are serving on his investigation. So, and that's going to be the bulk of it, because that's sort of the rhetoric we've heard from Rudy Giuliani in every one of his media appearances, his interviews over the last several months since he joined the president's legal team. It's not so much, and really this does sort of get at how the president and his legal team would view this investigation, that it's not a legal matter. They're not going to go point by point of what they expect Mueller to come at and refute, whether it be facts or information that he has gleaned that may be damaging to the president. They're trying to undermine the credibility of the investigation, because for them it's not so much the legal risk, it's the political risk, because ultimately for the president the exposure is political, not so much legal.
And not only affects him, but the Republican Party as a whole. NAFTA, of course, is another big story out of the White House. This weekend, the president tweeted that there was no need to keep Canada in NAFTA and warned Congress not to interfere with a new deal. What's the White House hoping for a new deal, you think?
Well, the White House is still playing hard to get a little bit, and sort of had this hard-nosed negotiation tactics with Canada right now. The president made it very clear in that interview with Bloomberg News that that was off the record at the time, and then sort of found its way into the public domain, where he was pretty clear that he believes that he's not negotiating with Canada as much as he's getting them to cave to his demands, and that's what they're trying to. The White House is trying to. It believes that maybe they can make some progress on that this week, but this is a core campaign promise for the president, and it's one that he's trying to sort of deliver on before Election Day, and it's a real challenge for him, because Republicans in Congress, Democrats in Congress, really Congress as a whole, does not want to tear up NAFTA if the president can reach some sort of negotiated conclusion to trying to reopen that trade deal. And then the lawmakers on the Hill will be fine. But if the president wants to rip it up or somehow kick Canada out of NAFTA, that's going to face a lot of resistance, not just from Democrats but also from members of the president's own party. So it will be a very interesting dynamic to see how these negotiating tactics do play out, because the president could be boxing himself into a hole where he ends up being bucked by his own party if he were to send an agreement that only deals with the United States and Mexico to the Hill.
So a lot to watch there. Now, finally, the president is heading to Montana later this week to campaign for Republican Senate candidate Matt Rosendale. Rosendale is challenging incumbent Senator John Tester, a Democrat. The president spent a lot of time campaigning for Republicans already. He's expected to continue doing so. What's his messaging ahead of the midterms, and has he changed his strategy recently?
Well, obviously, this is a nationalized election. By and large, there's some particular variables in some of these races, but by and large, this is a referendum on the president. He believes it that way, and he wants it to be that way. And so we've seen the president go out and deploy rhetoric like promises made, promises kept, or keep America great again, sort of variations on his campaign slogan from 2016. He wants this election to be about him, and most of those places, particularly if you look at Montana, North Dakota, Indiana, some of those prime Republican pickup opportunities when it comes to the Senate, those are red states where there are Democratic senators, where the president is more popular. That he is more popular there than he is in a lot of House districts. So where the White House has been deploying the president, where the president's sort of trying to make the race about him, are those larger states, places where the president's more popular than not. That's why we're not seeing the presidents go into a whole lot of House districts now, in part because they're smaller. But those House districts, the challenge Republicans are having this year is that it's a lot of places where Republicans are running in more contentious districts, where if the president were to go in, that would be very counterproductive. So you're seeing people like Mike Pence go there, Ivanka Trump, other members of the president's cabinet who are popular will be out in the fall in some of those spots. So we're talking to White House aides, as the president hits sort of the home stretch now between now and November 6th, he's going to be in larger races, larger states, places where he believes he can be an asset, not a hindrance, as he tries to make this campaign about him.
A lot to watch. Thank you so much, Zeke Miller.
Thank you.